In the vast expanse of the ocean, we were just four souls fighting against the endless blue. Each sway of our small boat weighed down on us, reminding us of the world's indifference. As the correspondent, I felt the weight of capturing every moment, every emotion, even if only in my mind. The captain, though injured, was a beacon of silent authority, guiding us with calm words and a watchful gaze. Beside me, the cook, ever the optimist, clung to hope as if it were a lifeline, while the oarsman, with his strong muscles and steely resolve, was our strength against the waves. Our boat, a tiny shell in the vast ocean, was all that separated us from oblivion. The sense of isolation was overwhelming. Around us, only the endless blue and the relentless sound of waves crashing against the hull. We felt the cold, the exhaustion, but above all, the uncertainty of what the next minute would bring. Each of us, though strangers before, was now irrevocably bound by the fragile thread of survival. The ocean seemed to mock us with its wild waves and chilling winds. The sight of land in the distance was a distant dream, a promise of safety that always seemed out of reach. Yet, we kept fighting, driven by a primal force, perhaps stronger than fear itself. We were small, insignificant, but our will to live was immense. The captain, even in his weakened state, guided us with a calm wisdom. His words were few, but filled with experience and courage. The cook, with his infectious optimism, was like a ray of sunshine in the storm, while the oarsman was the beating heart of our small group, tireless in his efforts. As for me, I observed, reflected, and mentally recorded every detail, aware that this experience would forever change our view of the world. We were at the mercy of the ocean, and every moment was a delicate dance between hope and despair. The vastness of the sea around us was a constant reminder of our fragility and nature's indifference. We knew our struggle wasn't against the ocean itself, but against the emptiness and silence it represented. And yet, we persisted, clinging to life with a fierce determination, even as our situation seemed increasingly dire. Each day adrift was an unending battle against the relentless forces of the ocean. Our arms and backs ached from constant rowing, a task that grew increasingly grueling as exhaustion set in. The sun scorched our skin during the day, and at night, the cold cut through us like a blade. Yet, the need to keep the boat steady and head towards the shore was a priority that overshadowed any physical discomfort. The captain, always vigilant, tried to direct our efforts despite his weakened state. There was something in his presence that gave us strength. He was like a rock amidst the chaos. The cook, despite his lack of experience in navigation, maintained an unexpectedly positive spirit. He spoke of rescue as if it were an inevitable certainty, a beacon of hope in our bleak situation. The oarsman, with his powerful arms, was the backbone of our endurance, moving the oars with a determination that inspired us all. The monotony of rowing and the ceaseless repetition of the waves became a kind of trance, a state where time seemed to blur. Amid this endless cycle, moments of reflection emerged. As the correspondent, I often found myself contemplating the vastness of the sea and our insignificance before it. It was a thought both terrifying and liberating, to realize how small humans are in the face of an indifferent universe. There was a silent camaraderie among us, an unspoken understanding that our lives depended on each other. Solidarity became a necessity, more than a choice, and every act of mutual help was a reaffirmation of our humanity. Even amidst adversity, there was a sense of dignity in the way we faced our ordeal, a determination not to succumb to despair. Nature, however, remained indifferent. The waves and the wind cared nothing for our efforts, our struggle, or our dreams of survival. This indifference was perhaps the most crushing aspect of our experience, a constant reminder that, in the grand scheme of things, our lives were just tiny notes in an infinite symphony. Yet, even in the face of this reality, we continued to fight, driven by an inner force that was as much instinct as it was a conscious will to live. The vastness of the ocean around us seemed to stretch on forever, a boundless expanse that swallowed our small boat and all our efforts. The waves, unfeeling, rose and fell as if mocking our struggle. The biting wind felt like an invisible hand, pushing us away from any promise of safety. It was impossible not to feel insignificant in the face of this natural spectacle, where we were nothing more than tiny specks in a grand scene. Nature's indifference was a constant reminder of our fragility. As the correspondent, I observed every detail, every change in the weather, and every nuance in the mood of my companions. There was a terrifying beauty in the way the ocean moved, in the way the sky shifted colors, from light blue to stormy gray, and finally to the black of night. This beauty, however, offered no comfort or mercy. It was the expression of a world that existed beyond human concerns. At times, we spotted land in the distance or signs of human life, like the faint flash of a lighthouse. These moments of hope were like fleeting sparks in the darkness, brief and illusory. The frustration of not being able to reach the shore, of not being able to communicate with the world beyond the horizon, was nearly unbearable. We shouted, waved our arms, but our voices were lost in the roar of the waves and the whisper of the wind. It felt as though the world was deaf to our suffering. These moments of despair were often followed by a silent resignation. There was a growing understanding that we were at the mercy of forces far greater than ourselves. The sense of isolation was not just physical, but also existential. The ocean became a symbol of the indifferent vastness of the universe, a reflection of the silence and emptiness we often felt within ourselves. Yet, amidst this vastness, there was a sense of camaraderie that kept us together. Even if the sea was indifferent, we were not. Each of us cared about the fate of the others, and this human connection was what gave us the strength to keep going. The captain with his calm, the cook with his optimism, and the oarsman with his strength all contributed to a fragile support network that somehow sustained us against the immensity of the ocean. With each passing day, the thin line between hope and despair grew more fragile. There were moments when the distant glimmer of a light or the silhouette of land on the horizon reignited our hopes. In those moments, our hearts raced, and a renewed energy surged through our exhausted bodies. The possibility of rescue, of feeling solid ground beneath our feet again, seemed almost tangible, a promise of salvation within reach. But these hopes were often crushed by the harsh reality. The currents pulled us away from the shore, and the indifferent sea kept us captive. Spotting a man on the beach who seemed unaware of our plight was a cruel blow. He waved, but his inability to help underscored the chasm between our urgent need and the aid that seemed so near yet unreachable. This failure to communicate and be rescued heightened our frustration and deepened our sense of despair. The captain, always the pillar of our small crew, tried to keep us focused and calm, even as we faced the possibility of never being saved. The cook, with his unwavering optimism, tried to find something positive in every situation, but even he occasionally showed signs of weariness and discouragement. As for me, I struggled to maintain a balanced perspective, observing and recording each event, but feeling the weight of uncertainty and the nearness of an end. The bond between us for castaways was a comfort amidst the chaos. There was a tacit solidarity, an unspoken understanding that though we were at the mercy of the ocean, we still had each other. This human connection gave us the strength to face each new day, each new wave of challenges. We knew that, regardless of what the future held, we had faced this ordeal together, and that was a source of comfort and dignity. Yet, nature remained a silent and relentless presence. The waves, the wind, the sun, and the cold were constant reminders of our vulnerability and the indifference of the natural world. The beauty of the ocean and sky stood in stark contrast to our struggle for survival, and this irony amplified our sense of tragedy. We were surrounded by a vast, indifferent world, and our struggle seemed small and insignificant in its grandeur. Nonetheless, we continued to fight, driven by a stubborn hope and a deep-seated desire to live. As time passed and exhaustion became unbearable, we realized we couldn't continue indefinitely. The captain, despite his injury, made a crucial decision. We would try to reach the shore, even though the boat might not withstand the impact of the waves near land. It was a decision fraught with risk, but also necessity. The alternative of drifting aimlessly was becoming increasingly unsustainable. Preparing for the landing was a tense affair. Each of us had a role, and everyone was aware of what was at stake. The captain, with his calm authority, guided our actions, while the oarsman, the cook, and I prepared to row with all the strength we had left. There was an almost reverential silence as we approached the coast, each of us lost in our own thoughts, aware of the imminent danger. The moment the boat capsized was a chaotic blur of water and motion. The waves, larger and more powerful than ever, overturned our small vessel with terrifying ease. Suddenly, we were all in the water, struggling against the current and the force of the waves. The sea, which had seemed a distant and impassive entity, became an immediate and threatening presence, engulfing us in its cold embrace. Each of us fought with all our might to reach land. The oarsman, our strongest swimmer, immediately stood out, heading towards the shore with a determination that filled us with hope. However, the sea proved stronger than any of us. Even with his skills, the oarsman couldn't overcome the struggle, and the tragedy of his loss was a devastating blow to us all. His death was a cruel reminder of the unpredictability and indifference of the ocean. Upon finally reaching the safety of the beach, the feeling was bittersweet. There was the relief of being on solid ground, of being saved, but also the sorrow of losing the oarsman and the awareness of how close we all came to the same fate. The beach, which had been a symbol of hope and salvation, was now also a place of mourning and reflection. The near-death experience had changed us, and each of us knew we would never be the same. We had faced nature, and though we survived, we were acutely aware of our vulnerability and the thin line that separates life from death. When we finally reached the beach, we were greeted by men who hurried to assist us. We were exhausted, both physically and emotionally, but seeing human faces and feeling solid ground beneath our feet was an indescribable relief. Wrapped in blankets and taken to safety, we felt true comfort for the first time in days. However, this relief was tempered by the loss of the oarsman, whose absence weighed heavily on our hearts. As we recovered, the reality of our survival began to set in. We looked out at the ocean, now a distant and serene entity, and reflected on the ordeal we had endured. The death of the oarsman was a cruel reminder of the thin line between life and death, often beyond our control. His absence was deeply felt, a loss that underscored the fragility of life and the indifference of nature. The captain, always the silent leader, reflected on the events with a resigned dignity. He knew he had done everything he could, and his calm demeanor inspired deep respect in all of us. The cook, whose optimistic nature had been an anchor for the group, was visibly shaken. His usual energy and hope subdued by the experience. As for me, I found myself absorbed in thoughts about the meaning of everything that had happened, trying to make sense of the universe's indifference. The experience had changed us irrevocably. The feeling of being small before the ocean's vastness and the impartial forces that nearly took our lives left a lasting impression. Each of us, in different ways, felt the depth of the experience. There was a sense of accomplishment, but also humility, an acceptance that, no matter how hard we fight, there are forces in the world beyond our understanding and control. In the end, as we moved away from the sea and returned to civilization, we carried with us a new perspective on life and the world. Survival was both a victory and a lesson, a reminder that amidst the vastness and indifference of nature, human solidarity and determination can make a difference. And so, we left the beach, not as the same men who had arrived there, but as transformed individuals, more aware of life's fragility and beauty.